Welcome to the Business Leadership Series, where we engage with leaders who are making an impact on their worlds and who want to share their knowledge and experience for your personal and professional growth. The following interview is designed to inspire you to become the best leader you can be. Your host, Derek Champagne, is the founder and CEO of The Artist Evolution, a full-service agency building successful brands, marketing tools, and campaigns, and also the author of the best-selling book, Don't Buy a Duck. And now, let's begin today's Leadership Series interview.
Welcome to the Business Leadership Series, where our goal is to inspire you to become the best leader that you can be. I've got a really great rock star with us today, Christopher Lochhead. He is the co-author of the HarperCollins instant classic, Play Bigger: How Pirates, Dreamers, and Innovators Create and Dominate Markets. He's a co-host of Legends and Losers podcast and has been a 3-time public company CMO and an entrepreneur, very successful. Fast Company magazines called him a human exclamation point. We'll have to find out what that means. And The Economist calls him off-putting to some. Christopher, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Derek. It's great to be here.
Man, I love seeing that. That begs the question. I mean, in your bio, you talk about being 18 and getting thrown out of school, no other options, start a company, and then 30 years in business. You're very successful. You're endorsed by some big names. Your book endorsed by the CEO of Salesforce.com and the founder, Jim Goetz, the Forbes #1 venture capitalist in the world, a partner at Sequoia Capital, all saying big things about what you're doing. So, man, tell me a little bit, take me back a little bit and tell me about your journey, being 18, getting thrown out of school, and tell me how you've progressed to where you are today.
Well, when I was a young man, Derek, I didn't know that I was dyslexic, and so I had a terrible time at school. You know, all the tough stuff like math and reading and geography and science and anything like that. As I got older and older, ultimately got harder and harder. And of course, nobody really knew. And so I got thrown out of school at 18 for failing out. And I found out at 21 that I was dyslexic. And so as a young man with really very limited options, my options were manual labor job or start a company. And so I had a friend who was in business. The personal computer was taking off at the time, and we decided to start a company. And so for me, I think it's true for a lot of entrepreneurs, Derek, entrepreneurship was really a way out of a life of struggle. And so ultimately, I grew up in Montreal, Canada, and I ended up, my first company did well for a while and then failed. And I was a loser at 21, and I joined another startup, helped start another company, and then ultimately moved to Toronto and started another one of my own companies, which got acquired by a Silicon Valley-based software company called Vantiv approximately 20 years ago. And so I moved to Silicon Valley, and at 27 years old, I was the head of marketing for a publicly traded NASDAQ software company.
Wow.
And, you know, I just kept going. I went on ultimately to do that 2 more times. And then my last CMO gig was at a company called Mercury Interactive, and we sold that company about 10 years ago to Hewlett-Packard for about $5 billion, making HP my favorite company of all time.
I'm sure. So take me back in the mindset, though, being younger, not having a lot of options. What was your mindset then? Did you have an idea that you were going to, so screw the world, I'll figure out a way to make this work and make it big? What was your mindset? Or was it just survival, get to the next step? What was your thought process back then?
You know, I think like a lot of young people and maybe young men, I had an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other. And the voice of the angel was my grandfather, Jack, saying, "Oh, you're the bestest boy in the world," with his Scottish accent. And the devil was, God bless her, the voice of my mom, Jackie, who said, "Oh, you're going to grow up to be a bum." And of course, they both love me dearly, and my mom's still very, very much around.
Right.
And I can remember, Derek, being about 17 years old and really sort of grappling with, okay, what am I going to do with my life? I was messed up with school and things like that. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to go for it. And I decided to really apply myself, start this business with my buddy Jack, and really listen to my grandfather's voice and prove my mother wrong. And she, God bless her, provided that motivation, and obviously my grandfather. And so I just decided I was not going to be a loser, that I could easily be that way. And I really believe that having a legendary life is a choice. It's a daily choice. Yeah. And most of us make an unconscious daily choice to kind of give up little by little on some of our dreams and our hopes and our desires for ourselves and our family and our community. And I've tried really hard not to do that. And so I made a decision to be an entrepreneur. I made a decision to be a success. I made a decision to be smart. I actually think smart's a choice. Right. And make no mistake, I went to work. I worked like crazy for 20 years, pretty much straight.
Wow. So tell me a little bit. So how long was the motivation of being called a loser or a bum? How long? Because I had a similar experience where, I had my parents that would tell me I could be anything. And I had a principal, actually, of a school that said I was a loser before I was even a loser. And so I realized for years that was one of my driving forces, not the only one, but to prove that wrong. But it flipped for me at a certain point where I realized that didn't have to continue to be my motivator, but it did get me for a long time.
Yeah, as it did for me, those of us who grow up with something to prove, you could call it a chip on your shoulder,
right?
Or even just, so part of it was that, there was definitely a punk rock sort of I'll show you kind of attitude for sure, and I'm a fighter that way, But the other part of it was I also wanted to make a difference. I also wanted to prove to myself that I could be who I said I was. And as my career progressed, Eric, I had a lot of success very early. And the cool thing about that is it has given me now time to try to, if you will, I know it sounds corny, but really pay that back or pay that forward, if you will. My whole life today, I retired shortly after my book came out last year. And my whole life today is really centered on two simple things. I want to have an embarrassingly large amount of fun, and I want to make a giant difference in the world. And I want to do those two things in the context of doing it with people that I love. And so, the beauty of, working 80 hours a week, and in my case, traveling, 300,000-400,000 miles a year for the better part of 20 years, you learn some things along the way. And, because I'm a guy who grew up on the island of misfit toys, I really have empathy for those losers, for people who are trying to figure it out. I know what that's like. I've been there. There's some people who find their place in the world, and then some of us have to make our place in the world.
Man, I love that, and I love that you haven't forgotten about that. And, I've heard it said before, and I also love learning, and so do our listeners, from people like you that have actually been out there and done it. And so tell me more about this Losers and Legends. Tell me more about what that means.
Yeah, so my new podcast is called Legends and Losers, and we're just having an amazing time having conversations, much like Derek, you have. I love what you're doing. The amazing thing about the internet and about podcasting and about, digital books and so forth is all of us today, we can give ourselves a PhD listening on the internet on our phones in ways that, you couldn't. Even 5 years ago, podcasting was around, but it isn't what it is today. And you look at how many books are available that we can all listen to in our cars or on our commutes or when we're training or whatever it is. And so, I did that as a young man. I really only had 3 ways to learn because traditional education wasn't an opportunity for me. And so I had to learn by doing, by seeking out mentors, and by reading. And so what we try to do on Legends and Losers is have an authentic conversation with legendary people about their lives and about their area of expertise. And we want to also shine a light on how the losing, how the failing, how the humiliation, how the pooping in your pants in front of a large audience, how, those things made us the success that we are. And, I think it's true for you. You could tell us, but for me, the failures, the losses were the motivation and were the learnings. Bill Gates famously said success is a lousy teacher because it lulls smart people into thinking they can't fail. And so I try to hold those losses, with me. And on Legends and Losers, we shine a light on that part of it as well.
Yeah, I love that. I call my failures my scars. I've got a physical scar on my arm right now from chasing my kids up the stairs a few months ago and going around the corner the wrong way. And I will always remember that. And I will do it right the next time when I go up those stairs. And my scars and failures in life and business are similar to me. When you learn how to look at them as a teaching experience, then it makes a big difference in your mindset for the next things that you go after.
Yeah, and isn't it interesting when we shift our mindset about that, right? I think of them much like you do. I have several tattoos, and so I think of them as tattoos, right?
Yes.
And the tattoos that I paid for are there to remind me of things that are emblematic of what inspires me in life. And so with my scars and my injuries and my broken bones and the like, I try to hold them in that same place. And, look, it's hard. Nobody likes losing. It makes me want to vomit. But at the same time, it's what gives us our life. And the other thing, of course, I try to do, and it's what we're trying to do with Legends and Losers, is to talk about that so that maybe we can all learn from some of each other's failures so that we don't have to jam our finger into the light socket the way others did before us.
At least not every single socket.
Yeah, right.
We'll take a few on this side, you take a few on that side, and we'll learn from each other and see which ones we got hurt in.
That's right. Maybe we can take 50% less blows and learn just as much or even more if we could actually be smart about it.
Yeah, I love that. So talk to me about the book. First of all, let me say I've watched some of the videos of being interviewed. You definitely are a pirate, and we talked about keeping the show PG today because we go on the radio as well. But I love your approach. You don't hold back. You're doing some big things. You're innovative. You understand. I'm a marketing guy. You're a marketing legend. I love watching your approach into how you actually talk about category design and things like that. But tell me first. Let's kind of talk about how do you live a legendary life? What are some of the secrets, or what are some of the principles for somebody listening that says, okay, here's a few steps that give me kind of a glimmer of what that looks like?
So I'm not a self-help guy, but what I certainly can do is share, with you what has worked for me, and if hopefully that can make a difference. I think other than sort of really capitalizing on our losses, the big thing is just the simple idea, Derek, that it is possible for us to design our life proactively. So if you say, imagine if it was possible for you to sit down and actually work out how you want your life to be. So I'll give you a simple example. My wife, Carrie, and I, when we first started to get serious, both of us had been married before, and we realized, we were in a very serious relationship and we were really falling for each other. We sat down and we said, okay, if you could design the most legendary relationship with a person, what would it look like? And we had that conversation over multiple days. And we also talked about what are the things in our prior relationships that didn't work, and what were the things that we thought really kind of got in the way of having a legendary relationship. So I'll give you a simple example. Couples, I'm no marriage therapist by any stretch of the ask any woman who knows me. So I take this all with a very piratey grain of salt. But couples can sort of snipe at each other. I told you for the third time, take out the garbage, or, where's my effing whatever. And, they get they sort of say these little things to each other that show irritation and so forth. Right. And those little things can really undermine relationships. That's a simple example. So Carrie and I had a conversation about that. And we said, well, in a legendary relationship, that wouldn't happen. So, Derek, we don't do that to each other. And if by chance we fall into a pattern where one of us says something crappy to each other like that, like a little dig, the other one of us says, hey, that's not who we are.
Right. Okay.
And so
identifying the things that don't make you legendary to start with, and then try to avoid those things.
Well, and just not just avoid them, but stop, change, start. Like, just have them not be part of our life. We're just not doing that. And then you really start to think about, okay, so who do I want to be? What kind of person do I want to be? And then what are the things I want to do? And ideally, what's the difference I'd like to make in the world? And what are the experiences I'd like to have? And who would I like to have those experiences with?
Yeah, that's great. And, I want to talk about taking action because I see a lot of people. I'm wired this way. I'm up early. I've always been somebody that if I have an idea, probably more times than I should, I go out and do it. Prematurely developing things in the past even. But I see a lot of people that have trouble starting. So, yes, they may want to be a legendary life. They might even identify the steps. What do you say to someone that's been on the bench and has not actually started? They have an idea or a vision or something that they want to do. What advice to motivate them to get up and get it done?
You have to be ruthlessly compassionate with yourself. You can't put up with your own, given this is PG, Derek, I'll say, garbage.
Right.
And so that's just garbage. You have to have no tolerance for that stuff. You have to say, look, I'm going to get up today and I'm going to do something legendary. Legendary is a daily conscious choice. Let me share this with you. I really believe there's three kinds of people in the world. There are people who suck, people who don't suck, and people who are legendary.
That's that's three categories. That's great. I like that.
Well, and think about it. As human beings, that's what's in our head, right? If you and I go out to dinner tonight and we're leaving the restaurant after the meal, one of us is very likely to say to the other, hey, how did you like your meal? Did you enjoy the restaurant? Something along those lines.
Right.
And what's the answer we're most likely to give? That was awesome. We need to go back there. I'm not sure. That place was terrible. We never need to go back.
Right.
And so as human beings, we put companies into those categories. We put individuals into those categories and so forth. And I really believe the difference between somebody who's legendary and somebody who sucks or doesn't suck is nobody makes a conscious choice to suck. But people do have to make a conscious choice to be legendary, to step back, design your life. Who am I? What experiences do I want to have? What difference do I want to make? What relationships do I want to have? And then from a career perspective, you mentioned category design. Category design is, I'm going to say something that people might find outrageous, the single greatest determinant of your success.
Talk to us about that more. You talk about understanding category design before your competitor does.
Yeah. So if you take a step back, Derek, you and I as human beings put everything in a category. So if I say to you, hey, I just discovered, this new app on the Apple iPhone store, and it slices it dices, and it carbidingulates, and it deconfibulates, and so forth. And I'm explaining to you, if you will, features. At some point, if you're like most people, you'll probably say, yeah, but what is it?
Right. That
what is it question is what category is it in? Put it in a container that I can relate to and understand. And the way categories get created is when people in a given market understand a problem in a particular way. So, for example, one of the category designers we talk about in the book, Play Bigger, is there's a guy named Clarence Birdseye. And before Clarence, there were two types of food. There was food, and there was canned food. And Clarence built the product, the company, which is actually still alive today, called Birdseye Food. They're the number one provider of frozen food in America today. And he created a whole new category that is, for most of us, an entire aisle in our grocery store called frozen food.
Right.
But he didn't make the mistake that a lot of entrepreneurs make, Derek, which is most entrepreneurs pull two big levers when they're trying to be legendary in their life and in their business: product and company. So I build what I hope is a legendary product, in the Birdseye case, a new type of food. And I build what I hope is a legendary company and business model to deliver that product. And then I just hope the world gets it. And if I do any marketing, the marketing I do generally is branding. I scream my name so that you'll know my name. Well, guess what? Clarence, in order for frozen food to become the giant market category it is today, he had to get the world to accept his point of view, and around a particular problem, which is, in this case, how come we can't get fresh tasting vegetables in February? And when that becomes a problem, the solution, called frozen food, becomes an important part of our lives, and now a giant, it's over a $50 billion industry in the U.S. alone, and it's an entire aisle in the grocery store. And so what's my point is, legendary category designers, whether it's at the business, corporate level, or at the individual level, position themselves. They tell the world how they want people to think about them. And in specific, they try to design a category, that is to say a niche, which they can dominate.
Yeah, that's great. So tell me about what are some other odds of winning an increasingly crowded world?
You know, it's getting tougher and tougher all the time, as I'm sure your listeners know. We live in an ever increasing winner take all world. So for our book Play Bigger, we analyzed every technology company founded since 2000 up through 2015, and we built a big data store information about those companies, and in particular how quickly they grew, not just in revenue, but how they grew in value. That is to say, market cap or valuation. And we ultimately asked a series of questions, but one of the first questions we asked was, most marketers, as you know, Derek, they tend to study market share. What percentage of a market goes to companies? And right. Market share is an important thing to know and study, of course. But there's a lot of data about that. We asked a different question, which is, what percentage of market cap, that is to say total value created in a given category, goes to the leader? And like I said, we analyze this in the tech space, and it turns out that number is 76%. So one company gets approximately 2/3 of total value created. And in a lot of categories, it's actually even more stark than that. Facebook, for all practical purposes, has no competitor. Google, for all practical purposes, has no competitor. You mentioned in your very sweet intro of me, which my mother will love. Thank you very much. Mark Benioff, the founder of Salesforce.com. For all practical purposes, Salesforce has no competitors. So there's a dynamic that takes over, and we can talk about it if you like.
Yes.
When category, company, and product, we call that the magic triangle. When the magic triangle happens at the right time, pow! That's how you get Uber. That's how you get Facebook. That's how you get Starbucks. That's how you get 5 Hour Energy. That's how you get Spanx.
So if a company's in existence already, tell me some of the value, the principles that you share. Is it too late for them to find the triangle of the category, company, and product?
Absolutely not. The magic triangle happens when you're able to connect your point of view about a problem to your solution. And so what you want is actually the world to think about your problem the way you do. I'll give you a very specific example.
Please.
When Steve Jobs, one of the greatest category designers of all time, got up and launched the iPad. And the iPad today, if you spun it out of Apple, would be a Fortune 500 company, and it would be in the top 25% of the Fortune 500, just by way of context. Wow. So he gets up at their famous developer conference, and he puts up a slide, and on one side of the slide he has a picture of the MacBook laptop, and on the other side he has a picture of the iPhone smartphone. And in the middle there's a hole. And he says, we believe there is room for a third category of device. Now, let me tell you why. And what he does is he begins to lay out a point of view about why this third category of device should exist. And the essence of his argument was that the laptop and the smartphone were not purpose-built for consumption of media and communication, particularly in our new mobile social world. And we all accepted that, and so we all slept out for an Apple store so that we could buy the iPad. Right. And the most interesting thing to me, Derek, about that story is years ago we used to talk about first mover advantage in business. Bill Gates launched the tablet PC in 2001, and nothing happened. And the reason for that, part of it was product for sure,
right?
But Bill got the category wrong. He had a features conversation with the market. And when you have a features conversation with the market, they look at it and go, well, that sounds a lot like the features of a laptop. I don't need that. And so they get rid of it.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. Wow. So tell me, any other takeaways in this book that you can share? This is the new how-to guide for entrepreneurs and executives wanting to build legendary, enduring companies. Anything else you can share with us? I'm excited about reading this book.
Well, thank you. So the big one is, what's the problem? And how do we think about that problem? And there's two kinds of problems. There's a problem I didn't know that I have, which is bird's eye frozen food. So pre-bird's eye, that goes back to the 1920s. There was nobody sitting there going, how come we can't get any freaking fresh, food in February? That just wasn't a conversation because people didn't even think about it, right? Sure. And until he made us understand that that was a problem, we didn't have the problem. And so that's one example of a problem. Another one is Uber. The problem, if you will, of personal transportation was one that we all understood and was solved by taxis and limos and cars and buses and subways and the like. Travis one day is standing outside in Paris and it's raining and he can't get a cab. And he says, how come I can't frickin' press a button on this supercomputer in my pocket and magically have some guys in an awesome car come get us?
Right.
And so although it's an existing problem that we all understood, he reimagines the problem in the light of new technology and therefore redesigns the category and builds one of the fastest growing in value companies in worldwide history. And so, what I would share with entrepreneurs is focus on the problem, not the solution.
Yeah, that's huge. The Uber example is a really big deal because it solved several categories. It solved the driver. The driver who was already going somewhere as well and met the two in the middle to benefit both parties. Really big deal. That was a huge, simple concept, but huge.
The other thing is, and I'll say something that may be a little bit controversial, the products matter, but there's this notion popularized by Eric Ries's book, The Lean Startup, which is a book I highly, highly recommend, called what he calls minimum viable product, which is sort of what's the minimum you need to deliver to the market. And what I would add to that concept is it's minimum viable product in the context of the problem and category. And so a great example that I love about that is 5-Hour Energy. 5-Hour Energy exists in a category that has been around since the creation of humankind. It's called beverages. The first one was water, right? And so if you're going to imagine you have to create a new category in the beverage space, right?
Right.
And he has this amazing insight based on a problem, which is just because I'm tired doesn't mean I'm thirsty. And I don't know if have you had one of these, Derek?
Yes. Oh, yeah. My team can tell you how wired I get on one.
Well, and how do you like the taste?
It's all right.
It's sort of bearable, right? And so 5-Hour Energy is about a $2 billion company, and they own about 98% of the category that they design.
Wow.
And the interesting thing is the product doesn't taste that great.
Right.
But it delivers on the problem. And so this notion of minimum viable product in the context of the category design is very, very powerful. The product has to be good enough to satisfy the problem as designed by the category designer. And 5-Hour Energy it was palatable enough, and most importantly, as a product, it fulfilled on the promise.
Yeah, and it focused on the energy part too, instead of a big giant can of something that you had to drink when you're not.
That's right. And so now there's a whole new category. They didn't call it a sports drink, which would have been in Gatorade's wheelhouse. They called it an energy shot.
Right. And
they're the only company in history to have 5 SKUs at the Walmart checkout.
It's incredible. Man, you've got great examples. Love your examples. Hey, I want to talk, I'm going to plug the book again here in a minute, but tell me, what are some things coming up that's next for you? Anything exciting you can share?
The most exciting thing I'm doing for me personally, Derek, is really Legends and Losers, my new show. What happened, the beauty of retiring after writing a book for, in this case, HarperCollins, our publisher is Jack Welch's publisher and Gary Vaynerchuk's publisher, so we got incredibly lucky to be surrounded by a legendary publishing organization and a great gal named Hollis who guided us through the process. Thanks, Hollis. And so the cool thing for me about retiring shortly after the book came out is I've had the benefit of time. The book came out in June last year, 2016.
Okay.
And so I've had the benefit of interacting with people online, in person, et cetera. And one of the things that people ask me, Derek, is, we want more. We want to be able to talk about this. We have questions. We want to talk to other people doing category design, et cetera, et cetera. And so for me, Legends and Losers is the more. Right. What we're really trying to do is create a platform for dialogue about what it takes to design a legendary life and a legendary business. And a huge part of that is category design. On a personal level, if I don't design my life in a way that I can execute on my passion, I can, if you will, really use my superpowers to the greatest end, then I'm not going to have a fulfilled life, and I'm not going to be differentiated, and I'm not going to be appreciated for the problems I solve and the difference I can make. So on a personal level, I have huge passion around helping people design their life and design themselves in a category where they can flourish. And on the corporate level, Derek, some people aren't aware, more companies every week in America die than are born. The Wall Street Journal last year, I believe it was in April, wrote a story based on MIT and Brookings Institute research. And the headline of the story was "The Crisis in American Entrepreneurship." And listen, this may sound corny, but entrepreneurship was a way out for me. Yeah. And this isn't a theoretical discussion for me. I was either going to have a life of struggle, not poverty, but certainly struggle, right, and certainly a life where what I thought was my potential was going to be massively underrun. And that was the path I was on. And I had no skills, no education. I didn't know anybody. I had no money. I had nothing. And all I had was doing, reading, and seeking out mentors and a huge desire to go be successful. And so, and I grew up in Canada. I did that in Canada. I moved to the United States 20 years ago. And I just think, whether you're Canadian or American, this opportunity is a very unique thing. And in America, probably more than anywhere else, this is a place where your supposed pedigree, whether it's the color of your skin or the school that you went to, matters the least. And what matters the most is, are you a person of character? Are you a person of value? And in a business context, can you design and dominate a new category and make a difference? Right. And so with all that said, it crushes me, Derek, that we are at a situation where the millennials are on track to be the least entrepreneurial generation in American history, because to me, the entrepreneurial dream and the American dream are the same thing. Right. Can I apply myself? Can I do something important? Can I make a difference? And can I better myself and hopefully my community and my country and the world? That to me is the essence of it, right? And all in the pursuit of happiness. And so the fact that more Americans are already giving up on entrepreneurship without even trying is crushing to me. And so the biggest difference that I hope to make as I head towards my 50th birthday is I want to spend the next half of my life trying to stoke entrepreneurship and innovation and trying to stoke people to live their best lives.
Love it. Man, Christopher, thank you so much for being our guest. I want our listeners to be encouraged. Christopher is a walking, living, breathing example of the stories that he's sharing about. His opportunity came from his entrepreneurial spirit, from his drive to do those things. And as you heard him talking about, he would have lived a life of settling or without as much fulfillment, not legendary, had he not taken the chances and the risks and thrown himself out there like he did. And if he can do it, others of you can as well, and he's just become a huge success. Christopher, thanks for being our guest. Give me a website, give me a spot where we can go and buy your book. I want to encourage our listeners to buy the book today, Play Bigger, and then where they can learn about your Legends and Losers podcast.
Yeah, they can just come visit me at legendsandlosers.com.
Awesome. Christopher, thanks again, man. Appreciate you. Can't wait to keep following what you're doing. I'll be reading your book next week, and I can't wait to. I'm going to follow you up and give you some of my thoughts too. I'm excited.
Well, and maybe we could even jam on some category design for Derek.
Awesome. I love it, man. Love it. Christopher, have a good one. Thank you again for taking the time to be with us today.
Thanks. Be legendary.
Thanks, bud.
You've been listening to the Business Leadership Series, where we engage with leaders who are making an impact on their worlds and who want to share their knowledge and experience for your personal and professional growth. This interview was designed to inspire you to become the best leader you can be.